What is a 72T transfer? Let me back up a step. One of the questions I've asked quite a lot is with regard to retirement accounts. Let me get my compliance out of the way. The powers that be love retirement accounts. It is a sacred cow that Wall Street owns and controls. And so they don't like when we talk about retirement accounts and advise people that there could be ways to get your money out of retirement accounts. Now, I'm not securities licensed. So what that means is I cannot tell any of my clients or prospects to move money, let's say, out of a retirement account. Let's say if your mutual funds is a retirement account, I cannot give you any advice as far as what to do with that. But I can speak in general about methods that are out there. Of course, you can make the decision to take money out of retirement accounts yourself. There generally are going to be taxes and penalties involved. I can link to an article by Bob Murphy, who's a PhD economist. He cashed out his 403B, paid the taxes and penalties, and moved the proceeds mostly into whole life insurance. I personally cashed out my 401k. I was contributing to a 401k because I got a very generous match from my employer at the time. I eventually rolled that into an IRA, and then I simply cashed it out, paid the taxes and penalties. But there are various methods for strategically repositioning funds that you may have in retirement accounts. Peter Nelson spoke about one of them in a previous video that we had. He is securities licensed, so he can talk about these things. And he talked about what he called his Columbus plan. But suffice it to say, there are multiple different ways you could potentially reposition money that you have in a retirement account to something else. And what I wanted to talk about today is the 72T transfer, T as in tango. This is an option that many people may not be aware of. A 72T transfer allows you, under certain circumstances, to move your money from a retirement account, an IRA, and other tax advantage retirement accounts like 401ks and 403bs to whole life insurance and not pay the 10% penalty. So if you're under the age of 59 and a half and you took money out of your IRA, and use that to pay premiums in a whole life insurance policy, you would be subject to taxes and the 10% penalty. Now, the 72T rule does not get you out of paying taxes. So if you pull money from an IRA by way of a 72T transfer, you still owe the deferred taxes. That money was tax deferred, not tax free. So you would still pay taxes, but you would not pay the 10% penalty. Okay. And there can be reasons why you would want to do this. I have a client who has done this before they met me, actually. Previously, they did a 72T transfer to move money out of their retirement account and into whole life insurance. Now, there are very specific rules around how much you can move. So that's something you'll need to understand. Of course, I'm not licensed to give securities advice. I'm not licensed to give tax advice either. You would want to talk with someone who's securities licensed, and you'd want to have your tax professional involved as well. But the basic rule is you would pay taxes on that. You just would avoid the 10% penalty. So the 72T transfer is one way to potentially strategically reposition money from retirement accounts into whole life insurance. Now, the IRS very specifically regulates how much money you can move. You can't just dump everything. And there are 3 different ways you can determine how much you can move. And we'll go into those in a second. But the basic overview is that the 72T transfer is a way to strategically reposition funds from retirement accounts into a whole life insurance policy without paying the 10% penalty, but you will still pay taxes. The IRS does regulate how much you can move from your retirement account into your whole life insurance policy. We won't go into the details on this. There's 3 different methods of calculation. It's based on your life expectancy. So generally speaking, the younger you are, the less you're going to be able to take out annually. The older you are, the more you could potentially take out annually. But it has to be done in at least 5 substantially equal payments. So it's not a one-time pull everything out and then dump it into a whole life insurance policy. It has to be done over a number of years. So if we look at this example here, there are a few different factors. First of all, how much do you have in your retirement account, or how much are you trying to move? In this example, we're just saying $500,000. What's the reasonable interest rate? That, again, is regulated by the IRS. They will tell you what you're allowed to use. Your age, in this example, 53 years old. The beneficiary's age, 50. What are we using? You could use single life expectancy, joint life expectancy, or a uniform lifetime table. Generally speaking, we're going to use the method selecting from the options available to us that's going to allow you to take the most out of your retirement account on an annual basis. That's generally what you're going to do. But of course, there are multiple ways you could do it. In this example, we would be permitted to take up to $31,247.36 per year. So in this example, you're 53 years old, you have $500,000 in a retirement account. You could take a maximum of $31,000 a year from that retirement account and use it to pay premiums into a whole life insurance policy. Now, you would still pay taxes on that if it's in a retirement account. You'd still owe the deferred taxes on that money, but you would not have the 10% penalty. That's what you're avoiding. And you would have to keep making those payments. That's important. Once this plan is in place, you have to follow it. You have to keep making those payments until you reach age 59 and a half, or until you've made at least 5, whichever comes later. Or if you were to die or become disabled, then you could potentially stop. So obviously you can see we can't just necessarily pull everything out, but we can pull a portion and avoid paying the 10% penalty on that portion. So this is a question I oftentimes get asked is, if I have money in a retirement account, is there any way I can break my money out of jail? And especially, is there any way I can move from a retirement account into a whole life insurance policy? And the answer obviously is it depends. There's generally going to be taxes and fees that will apply. Wall Street is not going to let you just get your money out of their jail so easily. But there are ways that we can do it strategically to minimize the pain, the fees, the taxes required. And this is just one example, a 72T transfer that I think many people are not aware of. So I hope this was helpful. We'll talk soon.